Okay. Welcome everyone to the 101 PC class. My name is Teacher Brendan, and I'm going to be your teacher for the remainder of the classes that you're going to have for 101. So hopefully we're all on the same page, but in the past 2 weeks, you've been with a different class, and because of either A, you were doing really, really well and you were able to pick up the content quickly, or B, you're able to spend a lot of time and want to really commit to learning more in depth and maybe at a slightly quicker pace. That's why you're in this class today. So this 101 PC class it's not a normal XCamp class, although the content is going to be similar and the structure and style is going to be similar. There's slightly different expectations, okay? So what does that mean? So in a normal XCamp class, we usually ask you to spend about 2 hours per week either working on the homework, going through the slides, practicing problems, asking for help, posting on discourse, those types of things that you would normally do. In this class, the expectation is a little bit more. So hopefully you're able to spend at least 3 to 4 hours a week. Hopefully that's okay. Maybe like 30, 40 minutes a day or two, 3 times a week, you're able to commit some time to this class. Or maybe you're able to pick up the content really quickly and you still can complete everything within 2 hours. But just in general, I want to warn you that the commitment is slightly higher. Myself and our class coordinator are going to make sure that everyone is really keeping up to date with the homework. And if anyone's falling behind, we're just going to, take note of that and make sure that we're all on the same page, because I don't want to see any of the students struggle. And so I need to make sure that it's really clear this is a slightly accelerated course. And if you're not able to keep up for whatever reasons, that's okay. We can always put you back in the other course, which is slightly slower, covers slightly less content, but still a great place to learn and progress in learning programming. Okay. So hopefully everyone understands that. And like I said, my name is Teacher Brendan. I'm sorry I didn't really introduce myself that well. I have been with XCamp for several years now. I've taught almost every single class, all the way from 100 all the way to the 302 class. I've taught camps for USECO. I'm not sure if anyone knows what USECO is, but USECO Bronze and Silver. And I do a lot of work in XCamp. So maybe you've seen me around, maybe not, but yeah, welcome. Hopefully you like my class and enjoy it. I'm really happy to have everyone here. And over the course of the next 7 weeks, I'll get to know you. I'm not going to have everyone do an introduction. It kind of takes a long time, and that's okay, because I'll still get to know you on a personal basis and know everyone's name. So that's okay. That will come with time. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go over so I kind of went over the class expectations. Hopefully you can spend at least 4 hours per week working on the content, whether that's be homework or asking for help in the homework night or posting on discourse, things like that, reviewing our content. That's kind of the general expectation. And also there's a little bit higher expectation in class. I hope that you participate. I'm going to ask you to participate. If there's any trouble with students who are not quite listening to me, like, constantly turning their camera off, or, I ask you to work on the practice problems and you just don't want to, that might be a situation where we have to have a conversation and switch you to another class. I hope everyone here is excited about programming and wants to be here. That's my hope. But if not, we'll just find out over time. So like I said, this is a little bit accelerated course and the expectations are slightly higher. So yeah, in terms of my classroom expectations, it's pretty much similar to what you'd expect with the other XCamp teachers, where when we're in the class and when we're interacting with the content, you will have your camera on. You'll do your best to pay attention. I know there's lots of distractions, especially when you're on your computer. Do the best you can. I'll be calling on students and we'll be having lots of discussions and talking about things. And I hope that you join in. If I'm not getting responses, I'll kind of just call on people to help me out. it's not a lot of pressure. There's a lot of times where we won't really know the answers, and that's okay. But I hope that you just at least try your best to participate in the class. And like I said, if you don't know the answers, that's totally okay and normal. It takes time. Programming can be quite challenging. And we have our 10-minute break. You don't need to have your camera on during the 10-minute break. And if you need to use the restroom or excuse yourself, just send me a message. I have the chat window open, the Zoom chat window open, and I can see it. So just send me a message in case you need to leave the computer for any reason. If not, if you have your camera off and you're not responding to me, or if you leave without saying anything, I don't know what that means. So I just like make a note of it, who left or who's not turning on their camera, and then I'll just deal with it after class, either talk to the parents or something like that. So pretty basic rules. And I guess other than that, please don't spam the chat. I know that a lot of students like to do that, but we're just going to use the chat for talking, but mostly we're just going to be unmuting ourselves and talking, engaging with the content. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's quickly go over who's here and who's not. So I can make sure we're all on the same page and make sure I have my Zoom window nice and big so I can see everyone. As some people were coming in, I just marked you down as present, but let's see, is Avery here? Avery?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's mark you here. Brian, did I see Brian? Brian, are you here? If so, speak up. Brian is not here. Okay, not sure why. Ellie, is Ellie here?
It's Eli.
Eli?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Eli. Jaden?
Here.
Okay, thank you, Jaden. Jinghan? Jinghan?
Here.
Are you here? Okay, thank you. And Joe?
Here.
Joe's here. Kirk?
Here.
Okay, thank you, Kirk. Matthew?
Here.
Great, thank you. Mike?
Here.
Thank you, Mike. Milton?
Here.
Great. Roger?
Here.
Okay, and Ray? Is there a Ray here? No? Okay, absent. ZE?
Here.
Awesome. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to get started with our class for today. And the first thing that we do in our XCamp classes is we take a step back to just remember what we worked on the past week. So before that, I want to say that if you're curious what's going on when I write my code, I have this Python editor here. I know some of the other teachers use Replit. I'm trying to get us all to shift away from using Replit. It's slow, it can give errors and stuff like that. So if you're interested in sort of following along with me in the exact same environment, it's called Thani. This is the IDE that I use. It's really simple to just follow this URL here and download it. So if it's no harm to try it, download it, see if you like it. It's really simple, and you'll see me use it in the class. So if you're wondering why I don't use Replit, I've just had a lot of problems with Replit in the past, and this is a nice simple way for me to just write some simple Python code. That's really all we need to do. Okay, so yeah, let's get started on our content for today. So let's talk about some stuff that we talked about in the previous class. So what we really needed to prepare ourselves for is to take input from the computer and then also print out information to the console, right? And so that was a huge emphasis of the last class. Maybe nod your head if you remember what I'm talking about, or can even give me thumbs up, something like that. So we have an input function in Python that we are going to use on pretty much every single problem that we encounter, from the 101 class all the way to the end. If if you want how high you want to go into competitive programming or XCamp. And so in Python, does anyone remember what that function is called? Does anyone want to raise their Zoom hand and tell us? Oh yes, Milton, help us out here.
Define and then function name, parentheses, how do I call it? The variables that you might use. Like say below, you would put in the parentheses x comma y, and below said print x, then print y. Then later when you put the name of the function followed by parentheses, put in the fillers like 100 comma 100 and then print 100 and then 100.
I see. Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, you were talking about like us creating our own functions, which we will get to, but we have this built-in, it's almost like a keyword, right? That whenever we write this word, Python just automatically understands that we want to collect some input from the user. And what is the name of that? Let's see who has their hand up. Yifan, can you help me out here?
Sure. So well, I believe it's an input function.
Good. And it looks something like this, right? Excellent. Okay, so keep it going. Tell me how this works. What do I do with this?
So input, whatever you put in the parentheses will be the prompt. Basically,
Okay.
whatever you put will be displayed. So if you put like, hello, what is your name?
Mm-hmm.
Then the user could input their name like Ifan, and then you could assign this input to a variable. So x or name equals input, enter your name. So now name is whatever the user puts in.
Yeah, that's right. And so if I test this out here, I can see here's my prompt, and I have this window here that's asking me to send the information that you want to this program. And here it's saying that information that's going to be collected is my name. So I'll put my name here, and when I hit enter, the program continues and nothing happens. And the reason why nothing happened is because all we did is take in this input and we saved it into this variable called name. Remember, a variable is just simply a container to hold some type of data. And what is this type of data that we're storing? We're calling it name, but each type of data that we're collecting has a data type. So let's see, Brayden, can you help me out here? What is the data type that we're collecting for this name?
Right now it is a string, but you can turn it into an integer by putting it inside the int statement.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's going to be our next one here. So yes, it's a string. Does anyone want to help me out write a line of code to prove that it's actually a string? How could I actually check this? Anyone have any ideas? Any ideas? How do I know? What's my proof? I mean, I can just trust Python, but Avery, do you want to help me out here? What is I don't know if you guys learned this last class or not, but
Type.
Type, how does it work? Like this?
Yeah.
All right, let's try it. And interesting enough, the way that this type function works is that it's going to tell me what data type I'm working with here. And so I can see that this is a string, or str is a shorthand version of saying this is a string. So I know that this is a string, which is great because a name is a string, right? Strings are just our data type for representing words in Python. So that's really good. However, sometime in Python, I don't want to use these strings, right? I really want to, let's say, collect a number from the input. So Jaden, do you want to help me out and tell me how I can change change my code around. Let's say that I have some input function. And remember, if we don't put anything inside of the parentheses, we just don't have a prompt. We still are collecting input, but just no prompt. How can I change this to collect just an integer number instead?
You put like an int and the parentheses in front of it.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it like this, right? Okay, and I can check. I can use this type function here, type of A here, and let's check to see what's going on. Waiting for my input. Remember, I didn't put a prompt, so it's just waiting, and I can enter my number, and I can see that it converted it to an integer value. So that's going to be really important for us as well to use for these problems that are saying, hey, we're going to give you two numbers, and you're going to do something with those two numbers. So that's going to really help us out. Okay, so that's if we want to take an integer value, and we have string values, we have integer values that we can collect. However, like I said, sometimes we're going to have multiple inputs, whether it be strings, whether it be integers. Yeah, that's pretty much all we seem to take from user input. So let's go back to strings and say, if we have, let's say, a line of input, and this line of input is going to have, I don't know, two string values. How can I capture that in my Python program? Z, can you help me out here and tell me how I can collect two string values?
There's different ways to do it. You can choose to do like inputs for each one of the values, or you can choose to assign each input to a certain variable. And you can, while you input it, you can separate the two values with commas as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, so there's a couple pieces here. So let's be clear. Let's say it kind of depends on how we're collecting this input. One thing that was mentioned is having two input functions. So this here, let's say I have two of these guys. This is to represent the case where those inputs are on two different lines. But I won't print them out. I'll just save them here. So I'll run my code, and I can see it's waiting for my first input, and I'll enter some string input here. And now it's waiting again for another input here. I enter it, and it's done. So in that case where I have my inputs on multiple lines, this would be the use case where I want to have multiple input functions. But let's go back again. Let's say that I have two strings, hello and world, and I want to collect them. They're going to be on the same line, and there's going to be a space in between. How can I then change this in order to make that work? I think you said the answer, but I'll follow up with, let's see, Avery, help us out here.
You use the split function.
Good. So this is interesting. We can actually chain these two together. Kind of strange syntax if we're not really experienced with programming to see something like this. It looks really complicated. And with time we'll understand, more deeply, why can we just add a dot after this input function and then write split? So we're not going to worry about how that works or why for now. We're just going to say, hey, if we want to separate our line of input by some specific value, we're going to use this split function. Okay? And with this split function, it's really cool because we can either provide a string here, which is going to be how we're going to separate it. So let's say we have a string and it's separated with some spaces. I can put a space character in between the split function, and I'll say, oh, okay, wherever you put this, wherever in your line is a space character, we're going to split that up in here. Okay, so I have this split. It's going to take some inputs and it's going to split them up. Let's rerun my program and let's see what's going on here. So hello and world, and I run my program. This is interesting here. I've collected into A, but what is A, or how do I know what that is? Does anyone have any ideas what's going on with my variable A? Milton, help me out here. What's going on?
Your variable A is two different things now. It's like, no, you have to put A comma B. If you print A,
Okay, well, what's yeah, so I agree with you. We should put a comma, but what is A in terms of what is it really?
uh,
Anyone know? Let's just check and see. Okay, let's run my code here. And then hello world. And I can see that it's a list. Now, at this point, you may or may not know what a list is. If you know what a list is, it's because you've learned a little bit about Python outside of XCamp, which is totally awesome. I always encourage students to go and learn as much as you want to outside. However, there's no expectation that at this point you know what a list is. So we'll talk about that. It's a data type where we can hold multiple values into one variable. So I have this list, but really what I want are these two string values. And so what Milton told me is that I can put a comma here, and then I have those values. So let's try this, and let's print the type of A, and let's just see what happens. So I'll run my code again. Hello world. And I can see now I have this string value. And if I were to print out the type of the other one, I would see that it's a string value. So although we saw this last class and it may look not that fancy, this is actually some pretty sophisticated, fancy Python code that's going on line 8. And this is something that in Python we called unpacking. Well, we're not going to talk about that now. That's a topic for when we learn about lists. But essentially what we're doing is we're saying, hey, we trust that our input that we're collecting is going to give us two values. And so when it comes in, let's take that list and just place each of those items into the two values of what they are. So does this work if I enter 3 values or 4 values? Does anyone know what will happen? Did anyone try that at all from last week, trying to test out Python and see how it reacts if you mess with it? Oh yeah, Senhan, did you try it?
I didn't try it, but I think it might like take the second two inputs and put them in one variable, maybe.
Okay, let's see. So maybe so I guess a good thing that we can do is we can always print things out. So let's print out A and let's print out B after. And let's see. So if the hypothesis is correct, then A will be the first number that we expect, or sorry, not number, string. And then the second one will be like maybe a list of those two strings. So I like that guess. Let's try it. Let's see how it works. Let's do hello world or something like that and see what's going on here. And interesting enough, Python does not like this. And it's saying, hey, too many values to unpack. You told me you were just unpacking 2 values, and you really gave me 3. So I just want to be very clear. There's a reason why I show you this. You really want to be very careful in what you're doing when when we use this syntax here. We want to make sure that if we are collecting 2 values, there are 2 values here that we have separated by the commas. If it's too few or too many, we're going to get an error, and that's going to be a problem for our Python program. We're not going to be able to continue past that point, okay? So yeah, I think that's cool. That's maybe something that we overlooked from last class, but good to know, right? Okay, cool. So that's a way that we can take in multiple inputs, and we can split them by this character. Oh, before we move on, so this splits them by the space character. We totally could do, let's say they were all separated by like a star character. That would work perfectly fine. What happens if I leave it empty? What happens if I leave this one empty? Yeah, Yifan, can you help us out here? What happens if I leave it empty?
So if you leave it empty, the default is a space. So hello world will still A equals hello and B equals world.
Yes, we'll actually one space or multiple spaces? That's a good question. Any ideas? I'm going to test this out here. Well, I'm going to show you here. I'm going to run my code, and let's do hello, and let's do a bunch of spaces, and world, no issues. And so to be even more specific, what I will say is, by default, our input function in Python will either separate by the one space or by many spaces in between. So this is just my suggestion to you. Obviously, you can choose to solve the problems how you want, but most of the time, the problems are going to say, hey, we're giving you 3 space-separated integer values, collect it in to your program, do something with it what you want. I really suggest you use this one. Although it says space-separated integers, who knows, right? This is more safe to always make sure that separates that by the spaces in between. You can write this. You can write this. I actually had a student, I think maybe 2 semesters ago, who found a bug in one of the problem inputs where they were using this one space of input, and actually one of the problems had 2 spaces of input, and so they were getting an error really when they shouldn't have. So like I said, I prefer to use split over the just having the character in between. They'll work the same, except for the regular split with nothing in between will be even safer just for any mistakes that problems could potentially have. Okay, that's multiple inputs. Now let's talk about what if I want to have multiple inputs, but I want them to be all integer values. And this is where things get a right. Annabelle, can you help me out here? What do we do if we have these integer inputs? We want them to be, yeah, we want to collect them as integers, but obviously it's a little bit more challenging. What can I do?
I think you would use map, int, and
Okay,
like
map.
yeah.
Okay, and then just fill it in with the rest that we're used to, right? Like this?
Yeah.
Cool, I agree. So now it's getting really fancy, really complicated that I put this map value here. And actually, this is interesting. What does this give me? Does this give me a list? What is this data type here? I think for me, I always get curious to see what these things are. Maybe you guys are the same, but I like to see what it is here. So I'll run my code. Oh, sorry. Here, I run my code. And let's see, 2 integer values. Let's see, 1 and 2. And interesting, it says class map. So this is different. This is not a list. And when we get to the point where we're collecting so a lot of values from our input, or maybe we don't even know how many inputs we need to take, this is where we then need to add another layer to then change our map into a list. But just be careful. You might think that when we use this map function, it's going to change everything. It's going to change everything in my input to integer, and then it's going to become a list. A is going to turn into a list, but that's not the case. So just be careful of that. And again, we can unpack this. So just like we did with our list, actually we can unpack our map. And here, now if I run my code again, here, 1, 2, I can see now I have that integer value that I captured. So that's okay. We can always use map and unpack these values into their variables as they are. And actually, one thing that we don't really realize is this map function is a little bit more complicated than what we're using it for. Technically, this first parameter takes something called a function, and we'll learn about that later. But if I just write the word integer, this is just telling my Python program, take every single item in my input line, and remember this is a list, and just apply this to it. So apply turning it into an integer, and that's really what's happening when we do this. So it's quite complicated behind the scenes, but we're just using it in a simple way to help us collect multiple inputs. Okay, great. So that's how we can take multiple inputs from our line, and they can be integers, they can be strings, whatever we want them to be. Let's move on here. Let's go to printing. So we talked about taking input from the user into our Python program. How are we then going to send it out? Well, I think you guys already saw me, write this basic print here. So I hope that's familiar with you. You had to use that when you solved the homework problems. So print is just this function that we use in order to send out some information to the console where we're going to write stuff. So let's talk about not just printing one item, because if I have one item, it's easy to print. Let's say I want to print out a string. Either I can put my string directly in here, or I can, create a variable like this, and I can pass that into my print here. And that will do the same thing, right? Just plugging my variable into my print. How about if I want to print multiple values? What can we do there for multiple values if I want to print multiple?